There are three different obvious use cases of Bitcoin. One is a store of value, and that store of value use case is well understood. We're at $1 trillion in that store of value, and there's no reason why it won't go to 100 trillion. Today, there is a security vacuum in the world, and that security vacuum derives from the fact that it's very difficult to establish your identity in cyberspace in an open, permissionless, trustless fashion. So right now, people, they use the login with Apple, and they trust Apple with all their passwords and their identity. If you lose your iPhone or get kicked off the Apple network, that's a big problem. In a world of proprietary online identity or proprietary digital identity, you have these authentication credentials in a very fragile corporate database. And maybe you trust Apple or Google or Microsoft. Now the next question is, does the US government trust them with its credentials? Now the next question is, does the Chinese government trust them? Does the Russian or the Ukrainian or the EU or any South American or African government? And now you get to this interesting issue, which is, how do I establish my digital passport or my cyber identity in an open global fashion that would be accepted by every country on earth, that would be accepted by every company on earth, and that would be accepted 100 years from now? When I actually create a document, how do I sign a document and certify it such that 500 years from now, it will not be tampered with? And this challenge of how do I inscribe a piece of information on an immutable network that's unstoppable and immortal, this was the challenge that Satoshi struggled with in the white paper. And this is what Satoshi solved with Bitcoin. And the killer app that we've used it for is for $1 trillion worth of money or property on a crypto network. But you have 8 billion people on the planet, and 8 billion people need an identity. And right now, if you go to X, you can pay $8 a month or $96 a year for a blue check, or you can pay double that for a premium blue check. And if you want to be a corporation with an identity, you can pay $1,000 a month for a gold check, and then $50 for each additional person for a gold check. And if you've done that, that gives you the ability to post things on one platform, but that doesn't solve your problem of how you send a message on all the other 100 platforms. How do you post something on TikTok or Instagram or WhatsApp or Signal or iMessage and so? You have these proprietary silos. You have the iMessage check, you have the Instagram check, you have the YouTube check, you have the X check, and then you have the Microsoft sort of check. They're all hyper expensive, hyper cumbersome. And what we need is a single open system that is not subject to nation state capture, where your identity can't be scrubbed out with a subpoena. Maybe you trust your government, but do you trust the government that your government's at war with? Because they could scrub you out with their subpoena on their server. So the promise of Bitcoin really is, if you take a public-private key combination and you can sign a transaction, you can also send a message. And if your transaction happens, if you use those keys and you start to digitally sign messages or you sign documents, then you can actually create a crypto seal that is unstoppable, timeless, immutable, and open to authentication by anybody in the world. That is profound significance, because what that means is I could digitally sign all my messages across all my platforms with that open protocol. I could also sign a document and timestamp the document for all time. So it's like not just that I signed it, but you could see when I signed it, and no company and no government could tamper with that timestamp. And of course, you could take it beyond that. You could say, I could hash the document. So if I write a will that bequeaths billions of dollars, I could create the will, hash the document, give a copy of the will to my lawyer, but then I could give that transactional information and the private key to my descendants or my heirs. And when the will comes out of the safe or out of the vault, they could actually check the hash and make sure that the lawyer hadn't actually tampered with the will. And maybe the government could know that no one had tampered with the will, whatever it might be. And so you can take these in a number of directions, but the real big idea is if Bitcoin is secure enough to send $1 billion from point A to point B, then maybe there are corporations that have $1 billion documents, or maybe there are contracts that are worth $1 billion, or maybe there are government documents and government edicts that are worth $1 billion that you would actually want to immutably document, sign, certify, and or inscribe on Bitcoin. And when you look at it like that, the way to think of it is there are three different obvious use cases of Bitcoin. One is a store of value, and that store of value use case is well understood. We're at $1 trillion in that store of value, and there's no reason why it won't go to 100 trillion plus. The second use case is medium of exchange, and that's using Bitcoin in high frequency transactions. It's Cash App, it's Lightning wallets, it's etc. It requires a lot of coding, a lot more layer 2, layer 3 functionality, a lot of compliance work. It's more challenging, and people are doing that work today. The third use case is system of trust. Can I anchor my corporate security, my national security, my social security, my personal security into that network such that I can prove who I am, and I can prove when I call you on the phone and say, help, I've been kidnapped or whatever, you can trust this. Is it me or is it an AI bot?
Right.
And right now, you really can't tell. We're very close to the inflection point. Maybe we've reached it where you can't tell the difference between the person and the AI-generated content. And so clearly the next step is you need to sign things with your private keys. And I think the entire Bitcoin ecosystem has developed really the most advanced methodology for key management, multi-key management, for signing devices, for 12 and 24 phrase, recovery seed phrase, etc. There's an entire body of knowledge that is developed in order to protect money and move money, but there's probably nothing more important than yourself. I think the phrase in Bitcoin is not your keys, not your coin, but I think that the phrase eventually will become not your keys, not yourself. And it's not yourself for 8 billion people. It's not yourself for 300 million corporations. It's not yourself for every government agency, for every institution, for every credible entity. And so that there is a vacuum of credibility in cyberspace now that's creating chaos and will lead to disaster if not corrected. And Bitcoin is the cure.